Hello my random viewers and welcome to Randomly Offensive. Today we will be continuing the storyline of Heihachi Mishima in a part 3, and we'll be kicking it off with Tekken 3. That's completely coincidental. I'm not sure how I did that. I actually thought I was going to be much further in Heihachi's storyline by part 3, but no, I'm only on the third game. Lots of details with this guy's story arc. If you have not seen the first 2 parts, you can go ahead and skip ahead to the end of the video. I have them both linked at the end, and then you can come back so this makes more sense for you guys. Now, in Tekken 3, the creator Katsuhiro Harada started taking the storyline much more seriously, started taking the actual story side of Tekken a lot more seriously, because technology by November 28th, 1996 finally got far enough and advanced enough to where he could incorporate more of a story and more story arcs into the games, right? And so the story started becoming more canon, and more of the stories were becoming more canon. So these videos will actually not contain as much detail per storyline and per story arc once we hit Tekken 3. Also, there'll be less creative liberties because there's much more to actually go off of the actual content itself, meaning that I won't actually have the ability to continue rambling on forever like I am right now. So with that being said, I will stop rambling and we will kick off today's video with Heihachi Mishima's storyline. So with Heihachi's storyline in Tekken 3, it's going to be a lot like in Tekken 1, where we don't really mention all the characters, or hardly any of the characters that were in the game, because unlike Tekken 2, he is the Iron Fist champion, meaning he doesn't climb up in ranks. He fights in the very last battle. So there isn't going to be as many characters involved in Tekken 3 as there was in Tekken 2. But unlike Tekken 1, Heihachi is more involved in the story, because he just retrieved the MFE back from his son Kazuha after throwing him into a volcano and killing him, right? It's so overdramatic. But yeah, anyway, so then he decides to organize the Tekken Force. And when he creates his Tekken Force, he uses them and dispatches them to settle disputes and bring wasteland under cultivation to feed the poor countries of the world. And this is all to gain the support of leaders worldwide. Now, there was one day where he sent the Tekken Force on an excursion, and the helicopters that the Tekken Force were in got destroyed by a mysterious being. And Heihachi wonders if this could be the Ogre, which is research that his son Kazuha, while Kazuha was in charge, managed to get a hold of and found out that the Ogre was alive and roaming. He has resurfaced, right? Over thousands of years, and Heihachi figures if he can actually capture Ogre and use Ogre for his own benefit, then he could actually use the Ogre to stop threats that are just as bad as the Ogre, or just as bad as the devil genes from what he saw in his son, and he could further protect the world. Now granted, this probably isn't the best way to go, but this is how Heihachi is deciding to handle any possible future threats. Now, one day, like 15 years later, after he won the second King of the Iron Fist tournament, 15 years later, he's visited by Jin Kazama. Now, he learns that Jin was Kazuha's son, and then after Heihachi hears about what happened to his mother, June, which we will learn more when we cover June's story, Heihachi decides to take the boy in. And so now, the grandfather is raising the grandson. And throughout the years, Heihachi spends his days training with Jin by his side. Heihachi, at this point, is refusing to allow the life of business to taint his skills as a fighter and a martial artist again. He's never going to allow that again. and you see that in the third game. He's far much more muscular and much more in fit than he was in the first 2 games. Now, throughout the years, Heihachi starts to notice that the ogre that he's been hunting reacts to strong souls and decides that he's going to use Jin as a decoy to catch the ogre. So on Jin's 19th year, Heihachi announces the return of the King of the Iron Fist tournament. Now, when the tournament actually kicks off, of course we get all of our iconic Tekken characters that debuted in the first games. Well, we also get a lot of iconic characters that debuted for the very first time in Tekken 3. A lot of characters that have returned in every single game since because of how loved they were. And we will get more into those characters in the future when I'm finally able to cover other characters when I'm done with Heihachi's massive storyline. So, with the tournament kicking off and Jin being a contestant in the tournament, Heihachi watches Jin Kazama fight and win round after round. And he watches how his grandson, yes, fights just like Heihachi, but also fights almost identical to Kazuha. So Jin had martial arts training in the 15 years that he was not with Heihachi. However, Kazuha died around the time that Jin was just a baby, like not even a year old. So this does interest Heihachi a little bit. Now, Jin shows incredible strength and incredible skill and is just a born natural martial artist as he wipes the floor and beats almost every opponent that he goes up against in the King of the Iron Fist tournament. However, when Heihachi watches Jin, he notices that Jin actually shows some of the same signs of having the devil genes that Kazuha showed in the first King of the Iron Fist tournament. And this worries Heihachi Mishima because he doesn't want to have to go through all that again. So having all of these most powerful, strongest fighters collected in one area duking it out, it's having the exact effects that Heihachi was wanting. It's coming up with the same results that he was hoping for, which is having the ogre actually starting to be attracted to the area and actually coming to show up. Now, if Heihachi can just give this a little bit of a push, the ogre will not only show up, but maybe actually stick around and be active long enough for Heihachi to capture the ogre. So, with this being said, Jin is climbing the ranks, and he finally beats his final opponent. So now, due to the tradition that the King of the Iron Fist holds, Jin now can fight the champion, the King of the Iron Fist, which is Heihachi, grandson versus grandfather. Now, Jin absolutely knows that this is going to be a real fight, and that his grandfather is going to fight for his title. However, Jin has no idea what kind of fight he's actually in for, because Heihachi is coming into this going, I am going to put everything I have into this fight and put out as much strength and energy and force you to put out as much strength and energy as possible so that the ogre actually shows up and is around long enough for me to capture him. And so that's exactly what happens. When the championship round actually starts, Jin does start throwing his punches, which are much, much faster than Kazuha ever was, and a little bit stronger than Heihachi's, and his kicks are very, very well rounded. And this guy does not lean more on kicks or punches. He's probably the most balanced fighter in the Tekken series. And so with this being said, he is a challenge for Heihachi. However, Jin isn't going all out the way he was with his other opponents, and Heihachi realizes this. So Heihachi just starts beating the shit out of Jin. He throws punches, elbows, headbutts. He grabs Jin by the shoulders and knees him in the balls, twists the guy around, and then slams Jin's back against his knee, and then just freaking karate chops the guy's throat. And then with Jin on the ground, he's beating the crap out of Jin. So this very quickly becomes a epic, very terrifying fight for Jin. Jin very quickly realizes that he is not just fighting for a title, and he's not fighting his grandfather anymore. He's fighting an opponent that is out to possibly kill him. This becomes a very intense battle, and it is a fight that I really want to cover, because it's just, it's so cool. But if I cover this fight now, I do feel like it'll take away from Jin's story arc when I start talking about Jin. So I am not going to cover this fight right now, at least not in detail. In the end, Heihachi Mishima does end up winning the fight with Kazuha. However, he does notice that the display in strength that Jin shows resembles the same type of strength that Kazuha showed in the first tournament, when Kazuha was just starting to release his Devil Gene abilities. So Heihachi is a little worried at this point. Now, when Heihachi finally beats Jin, that is when the ogre shows up. They displayed enough strength and they showed enough power that the ogre finally shows up, and the ogre wants a piece of Jin. The ogre goes straight for Jin, and Heihachi's like, oh, no, you're not gonna do that. So he goes and gets in between the ogre and Jin, and Heihachi and ogre have this epic battle. Now, you're going up against this old man who is a martial art master versus an ancient being who was known for taking over and ruling the world at one point in time, and no army could beat him. Right, so now you have this epic battle that I can get into. So, with the fight between Heihachi and ogre actually kicking off, oh my goodness, it's amazing. So it takes place in a temple on the top of a hill, and the ogre just roundhouses Heihachi and sends Heihachi flying through several brick walls, and Heihachi ends up in this small little hallway. Now, when Heihachi stands up, he realizes that he has several ribs broken just by that one kick, and went flying through several walls, and ogre just slowly is walking towards Heihachi. Now, Heihachi rushes back to try to fight the ogre. However, every punch that Heihachi throws just bounces off of ogre as if he's made out of rubber, right? These punches are having no effect on ogre. In fact, the ogre doesn't even stop walking, even though Heihachi is punching the crap out of him. And even if a punch connects directly to the ogre's face doesn't move. His neck doesn't get rocked back. This guy just keeps walking. And then the ogre just backhands Heihachi, and Heihachi goes flying back again. And when he gets up, he's dazed, and he actually stumbles a little bit. So it's very clear that the gap between these two are tremendous. It's huge. The power level of ogre is so far beyond Heihachi that it is honestly terrifying, right? However, Heihachi did remember and realize that he opened up a whole new gateway to power when he fought Kazuha in Tekken 2. And when he fought Kazuha in Tekken 2, he ended up getting knocked unconscious, and it created this huge power boost for Heihachi. And it was almost like a holy effect when everything, all his personal gains and all his human thoughts and human desires were no longer a part of him. He became pure, and the purity was the pure instinct to save the world, to be the world's savior, and that is what drove him to open up a whole new gate of power. Now, Heihachi knew that the best way to use it would not to be get knocked unconscious every time. He knew that there had to be a way to access this style, this form, this power without getting knocked unconscious, which is exactly what he worked on for the 19 years between Tekken 2 and Tekken 3. And so that is when you see Heihachi getting his famous electricity that he gains while in Tekken 3. It comes from him just focusing everything he has on clearing his mind, going into as deep of a meditation as he can, and clearing out all human desires and all evil thoughts to become pure. And when that happens, that's when the electricity starts to form around him, because that's just how much power this guy gains because of this weird holy effect that Heihachi seems to have. However, Heihachi can only use it at increments at a time. He can't just keep it forever and use it for a whole fight. It's in short bursts, and Heihachi's aware of this. Now, Heihachi is opening this gate up and using it when he's fighting Ogre from this fourth point on, because he charges at Ogre, and the Ogre is just continuing walking, expecting his punch to have no effect on him once again. However, Heihachi opens up that gate, clears everything from his mind, and then he gets that power boost. And that's when the electricity grows around his fist, and he delivers a massive blow that right to the stomach that actually causes the Ogre to spit up blood, and it knocks the Ogre back. And this is when the true fight finally begins. So, as this fight plays out, Heihachi cannot get hit by the Ogre. However, the Ogre can actually take quite a few hits from Heihachi. So even though Heihachi has unlocked a new form of power and has risen his power level, if I'm allowed to use Dragon Ball's speech here, then the fight still isn't won. The fight still isn't even. Heihachi does not have the upper hand. The odds are still stacked against him, and the Ogre is able to hover off the ground, meaning the Ogre can use his legs to block and attack, and he's able to throw more attacks in this way than any human being is capable of doing. So Heihachi throws multiple punches, and they're just light jabs, but they're using the holy power peak that Heihachi has. And then every time the Ogre delivers a punch or a kick, Heihachi has to dodge it masterfully. And Heihachi is just circling around the Ogre, throwing punch after punch after punch. And every punch that Heihachi throws does cause the temple to shake. It causes dust and debris and crumbles from the ceiling to rain down on them. But the Ogre isn't taking the fight seriously, and Heihachi's aware of this. Heihachi's putting everything he has into every punch, every kick, and though the Ogre does try to dodge some of it, the Ogre is more focused on just trying to punch Heihachi. But Heihachi realizes that the Ogre is able to punch and kick at much faster rate than what he's doing now. And so Heihachi's getting annoyed that the Ogre isn't taking him seriously, right? So that's when Heihachi decides to slam his foot against the ground as hard as he can, using the holy peaked power. And then when the dust and dirt comes flying up, he creates a cloud of dirt. And that's when he just dives through and delivers a very, very powerful karate chop directly to the throat of Ogre. Now this brings Ogre down from hovering into the ground. Now Heihachi's using a lot more than just holy peaked power. He's now putting his life energy into these punches, and that actually delivers a punch strong enough that when he punches the Ogre, it actually causes the Ogre to be stunned. It causes the Ogre to split the skin on his cheek just a little bit. And so now the Ogre is starting to take Heihachi a little bit seriously, and that's not a good thing because now he's delivering strikes at a much, much faster rate. So, with this being said, after just a short amount of time, the Ogre manages to overcome Heihachi, and Heihachi cannot keep up with the strength nor the speed. And that is when Jin manages to wake back up and comes behind the Ogre and hits him so hard in the back of the head that the Ogre has to grab the back of his head and look and what the hell just happened? And he sees Jin Kazuma standing there. And Jin Kazuma is glowing, not purple like his father, but he has a black aura around him. And the Ogre sees this and goes, wow, you're a powerful man. Now, I'm not going to go into this battle. Again, it'll take away from Jin Kazuma's story. But in the end of this, Ogre picks up Jin Kazuma and absorbs him and takes his life force. And this transforms Ogre into what's called True Ogre. And of course, it looks like a giant moth, really. I mean, you'd think it'd be an intimidating thing, but it's like a giant moth with a scorpion tail and wings. And so now Heihachi's trying to figure out, well, what the hell am I going to do now? Because now you're far more powerful than you ever were. So that is when Heihachi decides, I'm not going to fight you like a martial artist. Screw the god power, screw the holy power, screw everything. So Heihachi just runs right up, grabs a brick out of the ground, chucks it, hits a True Ogre in the face, and this blinds True Ogre long enough to where Heihachi can get on top of the True Ogre, grabs onto his horn sticking out of his head, and just starts pulling on him, trying to tear him out. Now, Heihachi is getting slashed by the True Ogre's wings, getting stabbed by True Ogre's tail, and getting smashed against the wall as the Ogre's trying to get Heihachi off, but Heihachi does not let up. He just keeps pulling on these freaking horns, and is pulling them out and pulling them out, and he finally manages to tear out one of the horns. He flips that son of a bitch upside down and stabs the horn into the Ogre's head. Now, this does successfully kill the Ogre, and instead of him being able to capture the Ogre and use the Ogre's DNA to create more of these things that are more submissive to Heihachi, now what you have is just a dead frickin' Ogre. And the Ogre turns into dust, and it actually does allow Jin Kazuma to return. Jin Kazuma just kind of shows up in the dust there. And so on their way out, Heihachi won the title of championship again as he carries Jin out. The helicopters come pick him up. He has to report that he failed to capture the Ogre and that they're going to have to find other ways to create specimens that are strong enough to defeat threats like the Ogre and the Devil Gene. So he is watching Jin as they fly away in the helicopter, and he sees the devil markings show on Jin. And so he picks up Jin, and very sadly, he walks over. And this is the moment, the time where he has to do this over and over again. He has to hold his son or his grandson in his arms and constantly throw them to their imminent death. And that's what he does to Jin. He just drops Jin and lets Jin fall and die. Now, I don't like this. This is sad. It's very, very sad. But that's just how it is. And so, with Heihachi now being the last Mishima alive and still being the owner, he forgets about ever being a grandfather, forgets about ever being a father, and he starts experimenting with genetics. And this is where we go into Tekken 4. Now, I'm not going to cover all of Tekken 4 in this video, but I'm going to cover some of it so that we can actually move on from more than just one game in the next video. I'm hoping to finish off Heihachi's story in the next video because there's not much of him from this point on. And the most exciting part, you could probably tell in my voice, the most exciting parts about Heihachi really are in the first and second game. And his story really just isn't very exciting from Tekken 3 and on. So, at least for me. So he starts experimenting, doing these genetics, and this is when we get things like Mecha Jack and certain amazing aspects of Nina's storyline, and Ray, and Raven is one of them. We get Brian. Brian is an exact result of it, and you also have G-Corp. Now, Heihachi finds out that his son Kazuha was actually abstracted from the volcano, and his body's been being stored at G-Corp. And we will figure out who owns G-Corp in the future. So now Heihachi's goal is to go and capture Kazuha. And so he sends his Jacks, his Gearjack, I think, is the name of him now. Hold on, let me look here. Gunjack. Gunjack is his name now in Tekken 3. So, yeah, Jack has so many transformations throughout the Tekken franchise, it's hard to keep track of. So, he sends all his Gunjacks to go capture Kazuha's body. Well, Kazuha gets reawakened and just destroys all the Gunjacks. And so Heihachi decides to lure Kazuha back to the Iron Fist tournament by telling him that he has his son, Jin Kazuma, and the only way to find him is if he beats him in a fight in the next Iron Fist tournament. Now that's where I'm going to leave this video off at, and we will continue this in part 4, which will be the last part, because Heihachi's storyline is no longer a huge part in the Tekken franchise from Tekken 4 to Tekken 7. So, with that being said, if you guys lasted this long, thank you very much. Sorry that this was not as entertaining as the first 2 parts. With that being said, take care of yourselves. Do remember to like and subscribe. Don't get hit by a meteor, and bye.